we are just having a great day. I'm excited about this one. We have Elaine Orler is our keynote. We're midday keynote. I like having keynotes in the middle of the day. Give us something to look forward to. Elaine, thank you so much for being here and tackling a really interesting topic for all of our community members. And with that, I just will immediately turn it over to you and let you introduce your topic, yourself, and dive right in for your presentation and discussion.
Great. Well, thank you. I have a little bit of a frog in my voice, so I might be shouting just a little bit louder or putting you on mute to cough a little bit as we go. But let me start with getting my screen to share the right screen that I need it to do, which has been a journey and a test in and of itself.
Understandable. I'd also like to encourage everybody who's comfortable, if you want to come off camera to watch Elaine's presentation from her perspective, it's definitely easier to present sometimes when you're actually seeing people look back at you in the camera feed. So don't be shy. If you're comfortable keeping your camera on, that would be fantastic. Elaine?
Yep, thank you. Can you just confirm you can see the slide only and not the speaker notes?
Slide only, you're good.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, magic does happen every once in a while when you do these webinars. So I'm going to call that the magic moment. So thanks for joining. I am excited to have this conversation. As I was asked earlier about doing this presentation, a lot of buzzwords came up, and it was everything from everything that's in the title. We're going to talk a little bit about the resignation. We're going to talk about high volume. We're going to talk about candidate experience. If I had done this right, I might have given you a bingo card and just see who could actually collect the most bingo results for the end of the presentation. But I do hope that we can also make it collaborative. I've got content to share, but I know I've left time at the end to have a conversation. And if we want to do what I typically call stump the consultant, we can play that game at the end of this presentation as well. So a little bit about myself as we dive in. I've been in the industry. I was just doing the math because of everybody else talking about how long they've been in the industry. I started my career as a recruiter 28 years ago. I started when I was 4, so go ahead and do that math. But from that time, I've been actually consulting since 1999 and focused specifically on the talent acquisition equation, on the technology, the business process, and the strategic change that needs to happen from talent acquisition. I've been through the booms. I've been through some busts. I've been through some heydays as well. So some of this journey is a little bit of a repeat. Some of the new journey pieces that we're going to talk about are the expansion and the evolution of where I think we're going as a market, which is exciting to see the solutions that are starting to solve for what I call the real problems in talent acquisition. Before I dive too deeply into all of that, I produce internally. Oh, so who am I and where am I working now? I guess I should cover that too. I founded a consulting firm in 2009 called Talent Function. We were acquired in December of last year by Cielo. So I now am the managing director of the technology consulting practice within Cielo. So our focus is still helping clients with their technology models, their business process change efforts, and their strategy and delivering to talent acquisition. We work with our RPO clients. We also work with clients who are non-RPO and are also doing all of these kinds of solutioning in-house. And that's the kind of model that we bring forward. Part of my internal responsibilities is to produce to our organization where I think there are mega trends and what things are happening quarter over quarter. So I thought I would start off the presentation with just talking a little bit about what I think are the mega trends. And by the way, this is about the pace in which I talk. So we could be done in 10 minutes. I will work to slow it down just a little bit as we go forward. But the mega trends that we've been focused on or I've been talking through for the year include total talent acquisition. This one really being that blending of hiring when it relates to not just the employment status, but a contractor's contingents, variable workforce. And we see this trend happening quite a bit now as candidates are employees and candidates, people are starting to look at the way in which they want to structure the work in which they're delivering to an organization. And full-time employment isn't the only way they want to work anymore. We have such a flexibility in the way that we can deliver our skills and our talent to an organization that we're seeing more talent acquisition teams take on an oversight of what that variable workforce looks like. The second trend is social responsibility and branding. Again, we've done a lot of content elevation and branding in the way that we've published our careers and our presence to candidates as we move forward. But the responsibility piece has really become relevant as we talk about how our organizations are really delivering to the market and what that social aspect of our business will be as we grow our own corporations and businesses. Not surprising, the COVID recovery, even with the Delta variant, where organizations are still making decisions on back to work or not back to work, back to office or not office, what that hybrid model is going to look like is continuing a conversation that really, again, drives directly into talent acquisition, but also directly into the technology and tools that we need to be successful with talent acquisition. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm continuing to see more product solutions, but seeing more organizations really go after ways in which to better measure their effectiveness in delivering towards equality, equity, diversity, also delivering towards inclusion across the business, not just with new hires, but also internals, and how those opportunities are happening. Another one that I think is really fascinating, and we're seeing more data on this on a daily basis, is the capital investments in HR solutions. Never seen this much money put into products to help solve for talent acquisition and HR overall in my whole career. And like I said, 20 plus years of doing this. This is an astronomical amount of money that just says that HR is ripe for reinvention, and the tools and the technology that we have are moving into mainstream and modern-based products. Data-driven talent decisions, that's a lot of words to say, but really similar to some of the products we've already seen today, that focus on making sure that where we're putting our money and our spend are driven by solid data sets and dollar amount models that help us make those better decisions. And then the newer trend, really ethical AI, really focused on really how artificial intelligence is being driven and delivering the solutions and the product sets that it's working within our market. Madeline Lorano and Tim Sackett did a great webinar on this that will be in the footnotes of the slides if you want them, but really just creating that conversational piece around what does ethical AI look like as we go forward. Beyond the mega trends, I focus on some quarterly trends. And these I found, I did these in Q3, but realized that most of these align to the conversation we're about to have around the topic for this presentation, which is really around the resignation and then what's happening from a candidate experience and high volume recruiting. So the 5 trends that I picked in Q3 were the early stage acquisitions. Again, we're starting to see more and more products being acquired or merging, creating more strategic partnerships with other vendors and products to deliver a more holistic solution. The work from anywhere trend, this is really, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but from the candidate's perspective, a very important model that we need to figure out how to sustain as we evolve our businesses. The frontline workforce and the challenges that are being presented there, and not just in recruiting, but in retention. The Great Resignation, which there's a lot of different terms I'm hearing, from resignation to reemployment to pick another R type word that goes in there. We're seeing the concept of employees that are taking their skills and abilities and defining what they really want to do for work and who they really want to work for. And then we're also starting to see a little bit more of the college recruiting reinvented. So the tools and technology that are starting to solve for college, for those new hire, new grads, but also the internships and the types of programs that really solve for that type of model in different verticals, even in healthcare, in technology, et cetera. So from a resignation perspective, I really wanted to talk about kind of the news that's been in the market today. So if you're aware or not aware, 4 million people quit their jobs in July. That was the number that's been published in a couple of different reports. It happened to be that 4 million also quit their jobs in April, according to another report. So I'm going to assume May and June were about the same. So that's a large number of people that are starting to say, hey, I'm done with the way I'm working now, and I'm ready for something different. 41% from another research study done by Microsoft said that they were going to be looking for a new job within the next year. But 65% said they are looking for a new job now, according to a Fortune study. So when you think about the actual resignation point, it's not just those who have resigned already. It's those that are willing and interested in making a job shift or change within their organization. And we have to ask ourselves, really, what is driving that shift? What's driving these employees to want to look elsewhere versus what we need to retain within our own businesses as well? And what types of tools are we using to actually measure this kind of information? So as I think about some of the drivers, it's not always pay. It always comes back to somebody says it's always about more money, but it's not. The decisions are really being based on how they're being treated as an employee or not treated. A lot of this goes back to one of the key things that's been years and years in practice. What's the relationship with the manager, and what's that relationship with their coworkers within the organization? We're seeing a lot more employees, because we were able to do this successfully or semi-successfully through the COVID time, that we're seeing more hybrid needs for work environment, that opportunity to work from home, to balance my own schedule or my own details around the hours in which I work and how I get work done and accomplished is really important. And it's about better benefits and career advancement. So internal employees that are looking to make those shifts just based on the other data are really those that are really pushing for that advancement or those changes that are going to create more balance. So the alternatives for organizations to really be successful with this, we really need to start thinking about as companies how we deliver extreme flexibility. This is also not just in how we design for employees to deliver work, but the tools and the technology that we give them to actually deliver their work in organizations. There's still the concept of Zoom fatigue. I am one of the subscribers of that on a regular basis, but whether it's Teams or something else, how are we interacting virtually? But what other tools are necessary to be successful to get work done? And how successful can you be with those tools in a virtual environment? So that bridge of the physical and the digital world is critical. And then the last area, which I think is one of the greatest areas for reinvention, and we're starting to see some products and solutions really solve for this, is the re-engaging and redeploying of talent internally. Before somebody is elevated to leave, we have markers and indicators that could say that that person's satisfaction level in their job, where they sit and where they reside, and what they might want to aspire to do next. And I call it that internal succession plan for all employees, that ability for the organization to start to tap candidates on the employees on the shoulder and say, how interested are you in another opportunity here, before we might lose them to a competition or externally for some other reason that might be a driver. So there's opportunities with the technology to really help support how we're getting that intelligence and how we're managing that intelligence for success. I'm going to put it on mute for 1 second just so I can cough. As we move forward in this, I want to talk and shift gears, because again, the topics were buzzword bingo. We've covered a little bit of the overarching Great Resignation components and drivers, but what I wanted to shift to is what we're talking about really for the core of this conversation is where we are with high volume and what's happening from a talent acquisition perspective with high volume. And as I make that shift, one of the key things that I think is really important is that we define high volume correctly. Because oftentimes we move the high volume has multiple definitions. When you're talking to somebody, it can mean any number of things. It can mean the number of high volume of candidates that you're getting against a job. It can mean the high volume of number of jobs that you're publishing. Oftentimes it's only correlated to mass recruiting efforts or big recruiting models, but I can see high volume in multiple models. One-to-one, I think of this as the one position and one head count. This is where you might see a large volume, 300, 400 applicants applying to a single job, where you might have those key functions for a replacement job or a best fit focused. So we're really starting to sort and understand the candidates that fit by criteria, by quality, by all the metrics that are necessary to get to the best set of candidate volume for that job. We also see the other types of jobs then are the one to few. This is where I see organizations that have, think of it as 3 to 5 jobs open in the same category. They may be opened by individual recs. They might be opened by a group requisition or a group recruiting model. But the opportunity and the typical way in which these are recruited for are what I call the traditional model. The traditional model meaning we have to publish the job, we're waiting for results or responses, or we're sifting from the data that we do have. but we're in essence trying to fill individual jobs so we can move on to a different set of jobs or a different set of groupings. These are not considered perpetual or always jobs. The next category, one to many, are the ones that I start to say are perpetual. These are the job types where you might have a consistent open for, you know what, we're hiring 100 software engineers. So we're just going to have a consistently open opportunity, a call to action, and the creation of community or the talent communities or sourcing type strategies to always be filling that specific funnel. And we will create the requisition for the candidate when we find the right person, but we're constantly sourcing on a many relationship. And the last category I move into mass, which is multiple positions, levels, and shifts. These are the types of jobs where we've talked about warehouse kind of hiring, frontline workers, retail workers, where we have any number of openings, and the just-in-time activity and the need to capture those candidates at that level is even greater than some of these others. And the requirements for capture are different. We're looking at minimally qualified to complete the job, not necessarily perfect fit. And so how we address and how we filter those candidates, how we mature those relationships through our recruiting process is very different within each one of these models. When I think about what happens from the manager perspective on a high volume on any of these models, but especially on the mass version that we're talking about, I don't know about how many of you go out to dinner yet. I live in Texas and we've been open for a long time now, but the concept that the number of times that I go to a restaurant or a retail establishment where literally the management is asking for forgiveness in advance because their workers are so few and they're overstretched in the work that they're doing. And the concept that this is the reality that we live in now, that there aren't enough candidates for these types of jobs. And if there are candidates, organizations aren't prepared for a fast and effective way to recruit them into their business in many cases. So we're seeing the short staffed. I struggle with if I got a medium, moderate level of attention from a restaurant worker, do I still tip or over tip? And I still find myself over tipping even for marginal work because I know how stressed their job must be. So I think we've got to think about when we're recruiting for these types of candidates, really what are the job success components going to be to make them successful? But those are the mindsets of what's happening on the manager for those organizations. On the hiring manager side, what we're seeing is these exorbitant differences in the way we're recruiting. I'm not sure about you, but my first job ever was actually within a fast food restaurant, and I was never offered a $1,500 sign-on bonus to work for fast food. That was just unheard of. I was barely offered minimum wage. And yes, that was again when I was 2 years old when that happened. But we're thinking about organizations are being creative in the way in which they're trying to get skilled workers that they need for certain types of jobs in order to perpetuate their business. I thought this other one was really fascinating, that there are certain McDonald's stores that are actually offering an iPhone after 6 months. So not just to start the work, but if you're willing to work at McDonald's for 6 months, you're going to get an iPhone. And for the entry-level worker or for those casual workers, I think of those that are even in their second lifetime of work, they're done working corporate, but they're willing to work another kind of interactive type of job. There's some huge benefits and some huge opportunities, but this is the reality of today. This is what organizations are faced with having to deliver in order to be successful, in order to collect the talent that they need the most. But what do I think from the perspective of where there are metrics for success? This is some of the areas where I think we have a huge opportunity with technology to help solve. So when I think about what's happening on the recruitment model, and I'm striving to understand more from a talent acquisition delivery perspective and what organizations need to be successful, the vacancy data has become more relevant and more important than ever. Even just understanding at the basic level why somebody's leaving the organization. There have been times where the answer is we don't even know in some organizations what is regrettable or non-regrettable turnover. And it's such a basic table stake to knowing whether we've lost somebody that we really wish we hadn't, or we're okay with the loss. And that vacancy data and understanding the turnover and the retention component of that feeds directly into what types of jobs we're hiring for. Are they replacement-based jobs? Are they net new added jobs? How do we actually facilitate that data set to know what we're really recruiting and managing? The second one is the market trend data. There are some great tools out there now that are starting to sift and filter in the market data. But if I were a hiring manager today and I had a need for, let's just say, even a corporate job or an engineering-based job, the first thing I'd want to know before I open the rec is what happened with the last time that I did anything with this rec. What's the market trend data? What's the likelihood I'm going to get somebody in the local area that has the skill set or the needs to meet my job? Or am I going to already need to look broader and look virtual for those types of candidates? Those are early questions that I would be asking, and I would expect my talent acquisition team to have those answers in the early intake sessions. Competitor intelligence is also equally important. Knowing who works for whom, seeing the org chart structure models within other organizations. I've seen some new tools coming out for this, but that ability to build that market intelligence around what our competitors have, what their resource models look like, and how best can we tap into some of their best talent and recruit them away. It's a very competitive world. Hiring trends, this is just tied again to the vacancy and the market trend data, but looking directly at what are our own internal business trends, knowing what time it takes to actually do the recruiting cycle and the recruiting funnel. How is that effective for us? And what are those, what can I expect as far as turnaround times? Decision criteria is another area. This is, again, where we talked about from the beginning, where there might be decisions really focused on the opportunities for how to publish jobs, like we've heard before, where best to land my information in order to get the highest return, but also decisions around specific areas within my business. What do I need in order to be successful for this job? What data sets and what critical aspects are needed in order to make sure this candidate will be successful for the job? And then compensation expectations. Comp has never had a more prevalent position in talent acquisition in my mind, because it's not just about the actual dollars that are associating to somebody. It's now about the full compensation package. And as we talk about some organizations that are saying that they'll reduce comp for candidates that aren't going to work at corporate but want to work virtual, or other organizations are saying they're going to retain a comp status package regardless of where you work. There's a lot of conversation around what does compensation really mean? What does that total equation look like for candidates, for the employer, and for our costs overall? And there are limited tools for recruiters to get to the comp data necessary in order to make sure that they're presenting and publishing the right kind of offers in advance. So we think about the recruiter responsibility for extending an offer, knowing what the parameters are, but even just having access to the internal and external data has become more critical than ever to make sure that it's a competitive offer, and then we're not losing out for the dollar amounts that we're really comparing it to what the total package might look like. And from that, I'm going to start to shift gears a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about where the process is hitting today with the candidate experience. And I'm trending a little bit faster than I planned on. So maybe before I shift gears, any questions anybody wants to ask right now, and before I take the next shift? Thumbs up that I'm going on track and this making sense to everybody. Good, I got a thumbs up. I'm going to keep going. All right. So just from a visual aid and a humorous perspective, I thought about the talent acquisition process today. And this is just about for every type of job category that you have out there. We run through a lot of steps in order to get a hire to happen. Everything from the requisition and the approval, the publishing of the jobs, and waiting for candidates. Whether we're waiting or whether we're sifting through the candidates that we've had from past jobs, we're still dealing with large volumes of interested level candidates or qualified candidates to make for the next decision. There's typically and traditionally always some type of interview, even at the entry level positions. There's an interview process that needs to happen. So they're selected, scheduled for the interview. Somehow we need to conduct an interview process, virtual or in person. And then assuming a positive outcome, which we know that there's a large percentage of candidates that don't proceed, but we then need to create the offer, route it for approval, extend it, and then close the requisition. Again, from a graphical perspective, this is the typical minimum number of steps in order to get to a hire within an organization. And the irony of this is, well, we go through a lot of work to get through each one of these steps, and the time it takes us to get through these steps can be elongated just based on some of the barriers that we've put into our own process rules. But I would tell you that the candidate expectation is much different. The candidate journey is they see the job, they see some kind of something that's called to action, they apply to it, they conduct an interview, and they get hired. They don't see all of the other things that we need to do to make it successful. And thus the expectation from a candidate is very different than the expectation from an employer around turnaround times and decisioning and communications. Candidates expect much more information more quickly because to them, and oftentimes they're the only one that's applied that's qualified, because of course I'm qualified because I applied. So that concept that they should be moving through the steps faster when these are the only steps that they recognize and understand can create a disconnect between what the organization's expectations are for recruiting as well. So the real time, real fast is important, but the one size does not fit all. So the candidate journey components are really important. And I think at the bare minimum, every organization needs to subscribe to these. And I'm going to go into each of them in more detail. But the accessibility on all devices, the ability to make sure that regardless of the tool that I have in front of me, I can actually get through the process. Self-service where it makes sense, appropriate time and attention based on job expectations, relevant documents. What do I really need in order to apply to this job? What is necessary? The candidate expectation of tell me more about the organization. They want to learn, they want to understand. Bottom line, they want to be treated with respect and they want timely feedback as they go forward. But as I break each of these down just a little bit more, candidate journey expectations, again, accessible on all device, self-service where it makes sense is really critical. We're seeing, again, I remember days before there were QR codes. I remember days when we actually printed flyers and put them on windshields of cars in order to attract attention, or you printed large banners and hung them on posters around. My first experience as a recruiter was we chose to take the actual flyers of all the deli restaurants that were around us and our 6 competitors and offered to print their deli menus every week if we could have the last page as our recruiting brochure, because all those deli menus sit inside of the desks of all the assistants and all the receptionists of all of our competitors that would then ultimately pass them out to candidates that were there interviewing to see what they wanted for lunch. And the last page would become work for us instead. So it's the competitive nature hasn't changed. The tools that we use have become more automated and more successful. So the QR codes to capture attention right at the point in time. I think about each of these types of organizations. School bus drivers working with a QR code and able to apply to the job via your phone. I think that there's some creative ways that organizations are really needing to go after the talent in the moment in time in which they are interested, and knowing how to capture that interest right out of the gate. So whether it's a texting process, whether it's a QR code, whether it's a chat type solution, there's definite need for this self-service where it makes sense. Now, this doesn't solve for all of our jobs. I mean, this may be the first point of entry, but depending on the type of job, you might still be required or needed to provide the relevant documentation. And in many cases, that may be a resume, but in many job cases, resume is not as critical as it used to be. I don't need a resume to start an entry-level position. I probably don't have a robust resume to give you. So let me fill out some things around titles or jobs or things that I've done that it might reflect well about me, but may not be in a job resume perspective. It could be a LinkedIn profile. It could be an application form. There's some interesting data that I received from Paradox really around their bot and some of those activities. There's a 9% completion rate for long-formed application forms within clients, but there was a 62% completion rate for those that went through the bot and the experience of actually interacting and asking for next steps in the process, because it can be done by your phone, it can be done via your tablet while you're multitasking, doing other things. It doesn't require that you have to be in front of your large screen computer. completing all of these other additional things. You're being asked questions and facilitated into a conversation. So I think as we think about the journey expectations, each of these models, again, relevant to what the job type might be, but opportunity and opportunistic to see more and more technology enable us to be successful with those expectations and the documentation that we need to have. Again, from the expectation from candidates, it's really telling me more details about the organization. And it goes back to that social responsibility that I referenced before as well. They're looking at the content now. It used to be we published very little. We just had a jobs page, which was search and apply. I remember those days very well. But now it's really about the holistic approach to the organization and really bringing candidates in to feel that they're going to be a part of this community and that they're represented in the content and in the story that the company is saying. I picked these 3 organizations specifically because they won the Candidate Experience Awards this last year, but also based on the fact that they have this kind of environment where they're really publishing the content and information right up front and providing the tools for candidates to get to know them as an organization, even before they apply or during the apply process, to make sure that they feel familiar with and understand the values and that each organization represents. To round out the candidate journey expectations, I think that there are some critical components here that I wanted to just spend some time with, and that's the treat me with respect. Having been a co-founder of the talent board back in 2010, which is hard to believe it's already been a little over 10 years. One of the things from the first data research studies that has been done and been proven ever since is that candidates will pull out of the process because they don't feel they were respected. And that is disrespected during the interviews or appointment scheduling, no shows from us. There used to be a time when we had the upper hand as recruiters, where we could choose to treat candidates disrespectfully because we were too busy. Those times are gone. Candidates are ghosting us now, which I think was a conversational topic for today as well. But they've taken on the mindset that they own their journey and they own their opportunities. The number of times I've talked with clients recently about what to do about the candidates that are no shows after offer. They've accepted the offer and then they just really no show at this point of hire, is reinventing a lot of the onboarding and the nurturing capacity that needs to happen with onboarding. But the reality is candidates will pull out if they don't feel that they were respected. The process could be too long, like we talked about before. Candidates are expecting a shorter process, or that in some cases the salary or the total comp didn't meet their expectations. What I see more often now in the decisioning is the candidate's able to go back and get a competitive offer from their existing employer, and they're staying within their existing employer due to that competitive nature. So that's where salary and some of the benefit pieces are coming into play. But what can we do to make this overall and better is providing better feedback. How long will the application process take? I think is one of the #1 questions candidate asks. And if we were honest with them and say it's going to take a week or 2 weeks, then depending on the role, depending on the type of position that we're hiring for, that might be a reasonable expectation. The other reasonable expectation might be it's going to take 2 hours, depending on the role and the type. But being able to be transparent with the candidate on what to expect in those next steps, making sure that they know what those process steps are going to be, and then being true to what those are. If we say we're going to commit to being follow up with them within 48 hours, that we need to follow through with those commitments, and then explain why they're actually doing certain things in the process. I think that we're going to see predictions for next year as candidates still own their journey and this recruitment cycle, is they also own their data. And so questioning why they need to enter information multiple times, questioning where the assessment information is going and where's their copy of the end results of those things, I think are only going to increase as candidates start to become more aware of the data that they're providing in the recruitment cycle is critical information, but they should also have the same kind of transparency in what data was used in order to select or not select them going forward. And then telling the candidates how to learn more about the process. So giving them more insights into what the research was. And each of these just came from the 2020 research report that came out from the talent board. If you don't subscribe to it, I encourage you to subscribe. The content and the information that's published from the the hundreds of thousands of candidates that answer surveys annually is really valuable in thinking about what those expectations are. So as I shift into the fourth gear for the conversation today, I want to just cover where can we be doing more with technology in talent acquisition and in the overarching needs that we have. And I think the irony of this, again, as I put the presentation together and then I started to see some of the demos and the relationships that are going to happen today, and they all fall within many of these same categories. So I was kind of excited that I was validating myself a little bit. But AI matching is really important. And I think we're going to continue to see more advanced ways in which we are able to filter, sift, and identify the right candidates for the right job with the right content and the right intentions. Right now, there's a lot of information that's being handled through matching. There's some tools that are doing it in different ways, but really understanding what the solution is being defined to deliver and making sure that those results are not causing any kind of biased or discretionary changes that need to be reevaluated. But we're seeing more intelligent-based matching happening across the product sets today. And I think this is where a lot of the innovation is happening in new tools. I also see this happening within core platform products that are acquiring products that do these types of sets. So we're going to continue to see an evolution of where matching falls, whether it falls within the traditional talent acquisition suite tool or whether it falls in a best of breed based product. Intelligent automation is just another way of saying the robotic process automation. This is the ability for the system to actually facilitate next steps and really move information and process steps through change efforts without necessarily having to manually do this one by one. I think of I remember the days when I dreamed of having what would be called the bulk action button, where I could select multiple and move those candidates from stage A to stage B. We're moving into much more of a bulk action in the automation that says, hey, this candidate's been in this step for X number of hours. Would you like to move them to this step or that step? Or if change hasn't happened, the system automatically making that next step available or that next activity based on something or criteria that's already happened. So this is also done substantially within products that are doing automated scheduling. You can bulk select a set of candidates and automatically move them to a scheduling tool. The automation is actually making the scheduling event happen, doing the coordination, doing the collection and the summarization, and then publishing out the scheduled date and time, where there were days and times where hundreds of recruiting coordinators would spend hours and hours of time just trying to triangulate schedules, where we now have automation to solve for that. Conversational AI, which I covered just a little bit before, but really moving into that ability to create a dynamic interface and a dynamic interaction for the candidates and the employers, even the managers in interaction and relationship within the process. So I think about this in the long scheme of things, that a manager has a bot as well. I need to open a job. Where do you need it open? How many candidates do you need? Facilitating that conversational piece. Great, there's the X number of candidates already in the process. Should we just auto schedule those? How did you want to market? Not replacing the recruiter, but facilitating some of those conversation pieces that need to happen so recruiters can be more focused on making sure that they're filtering the right candidates to the jobs and helping to ensure that the facilitation of all of those decisions are done successfully. But the conversational AI on the candidate side is also producing great results, especially with that just in time. Wow, I saw an interest. I love shopping here. Boy, I wouldn't mind actually working a part-time shift for the holiday season. I get all the discounts and benefits. Before I leave that location, before I leave that store, is there a way to capture my information, capture my interests, and then facilitate that conversation to happen, even on the web pages, et cetera, wherever I am, whatever I'm thinking about doing next, being able to do that instant capture is what I put into the conversational AI component. Predictive analytics, really focused again on getting us the data that we need in order to make better decisions. There's a lot of different ways in which we programize analytics, but for me, it's that ability to say, if it's a new requisition, I would like to know all the data that happened on the last one that was similar, or the last 5 that were similar. Serve up to me that there's our silver medalist We had 14 silver medalists, and they now work for X number of companies and are probably still interested. The data that exists within our systems today that just needs to be curated to be more successful is one of the hottest areas, most exciting area for me, if you ask me personally, because I think that there is so much rich information that we could be even enriching more to make sure that our decisions are not starting from scratch every time, that we're not starting a new job as if we've never recruited for it before, but that we're starting the job with a space that we already know more information around what it's going to take and how effective we can be and how fast we can be in order to deliver to the business. And then the last category overall is the platform model. This is really just focused on, again, we're starting to see the convergence of more and more products. I think that there is a core platform that every organization needs to be successful with recruiting. It starts with the CRM or the recruitment marketing platform. It continues with the applicant tracking components that's necessary for transactions. And it rounds out with onboarding solutions to make sure that we're actually facilitating that relationship with the candidate through the point of hire and to carry them across that line successfully. Those are the minimum that I see in a platform model. Beyond that, there's a horizon of additional products that are really critical to the overall talent acquisition equation. But we're starting to see more and more products start with where do they fit within the horizon model or fit within the core platform model to really deliver success. And we're going to continue to see, I think, evolution in what that platform is. I was an early subscriber of killing the term applicant tracking system, the ATS. I think it's moved to the transaction-based model, but we now have a talent acquisition system, a TAS system that's really comprised of more of these tools being fully integrated or delivered within a single platform model. Okay, so that was a lot that I covered in 40 minutes. I was trying to shoot for 45, but I did it faster than I thought I was going to. But just a little bit again about where I come from a Cielo perspective. I oversee and manage our talent function, Cielo company tech consulting team. I also oversee our Cielo Labs, which is an incubator for technology that we look at for our clients, as well as market trends data. And then we also have our own technology platform that we host for our clients around automation and making sure that our delivery from an RPO perspective is top-notch with technology at the core. So 41 minutes in, Ward, I don't know if I did it or not, but I'm going to open to questions and feedback, and let's just see where the conversation goes.
Well, it's the first time I've heard the abbreviation TAS. So that's good. So I've got, that's a new one on me.
Nice.
Well, it could be system.
Thank you so much, Elaine.
Thank
Yes.
you, Wendy.
Fantastic information.
Yes. Questions. We can open up the floor. Everybody can come on camera. We can do just a nice, we've got a few minutes here before our next appointment slot.
My brain's full. May I be excused?
I have a question, Elaine. Hey, good to see you. You know, I'm a little bit of a cynic of the whole hiring bonus situation because at some point it's just going to kind of encourage everybody to leave all the time as soon as they get paid and then leave, get a new one. Why wouldn't you? And I laughed when I saw the advertisement about giving away a free iPhone, you know, for jobs. And it's like, what about a livable wage and benefits, you know, at that level? And so it's funny because I see the employers trying to do all these quote creative things, but what's really needed, you know, are we done with the days of cheap labor and cheap food? And we're going to have to, you know, pony up and basically own up the fact that there's millions and millions of people that are working in that job that we hope continue to do that. In order to do so, we might have to pay a little bit more and we might have to offer employee benefits. And yeah, and have it be a proper profession. And so,
I actually agree and subscribe to everything you're saying as well. I think that's a short-term fix to think of these bonuses and these perks in order to, but it's such a high need in order to fill such a large volume right now. The perks are what they're using to generate, but I do think we have a social responsibility to really think about what is the minimum wage, what is the right type of work, but pay for performance, pay for the work delivered, and those models that need to be adjusted completely. We know that society can't live on minimum wage. We know that it's borderline to the poverty line. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, and I think talent acquisition has a great insight into, again, what the turnover numbers are, what the resignation numbers are, but also what the offer declines are and why, and being able to feed that information back within the business in order to really make sure that we're making those right decisions. And so often we're so busy with the fill ratio numbers that we lose sight of the important data in the decline ratio numbers just as much. And the turnover, is it 5 cents a day, an hour, can be life changing for certain people. 15 cents an hour can help afford childcare. So there's these things that really are life event models that are impacted by those roles as well.
So I wonder how long it'll take us to get there. You know.
I don't know. Well, again, post-COVID, because we've had this year and a half that we have had, I'd like to say more organizations are focused on it now, because the reality is they don't have the workforce that they need.
Right.
I think that there's still huge disparate impact between the small mom and pops and the large corporations, and we still got to right size on some of those equalities as well.
Yeah.
Lots of social work to be done.
Yeah. It's not necessarily, it's a mindset problem versus a technology problem.
Yep.
Elaine, earlier you mentioned one size does not fit all. And I think I was more on the acquiring of the talent. And I guess with looking at evergreen jobs, it's probably easier to simplify the hiring, process, because you don't maybe have to get the requisition approved and all that stuff. But do you think that's going to change? Do you think like the formalities of getting things approved and all that stuff's going to get better or worse with technology?
It's a great question. I think approval routings have changed right now because everybody has such a high need. It's like, hurry up and get them in. So just go ahead and add more to the head count. We'll tell you when to slow down. And I think that's happened over the last couple of quarters. I think we're coming into the holiday season, so that's a different shift that's going to happen for the mass volumes perspective. But I do think we're going to get to a point where we can right size again on the type of volume that organizations need to have. I don't think it's in the next 6 months. I think it's farther out than that for sure. Maybe Q3 of next year that we might be able to see some of this right sizing happen. But the one size fits all when it comes to an evergreen requisition, it has to be identical in order for evergreen to be successful. And so often we use evergreen in like a software engineer model or something else, and they're not identical. We need different skill sets for different job types. So our constant search and our constant trying to identify which is going to be the best fit is based on the skills, values, criteria, versus an evergreen, which is a skills-based. Can you perform work in this shift? Can you, are you willing to lift 50 pounds? Can you demonstrate customer service? Which is slightly different than, do you have a degree? Do you have a licensing? Do you have security clearance? And so the equation is different for how you recruit for those models. I'm also one of those people, I'd like to see the term evergreen go away when it comes to recruiting. I think, again, we've got so many models that we just lump everything into one that it doesn't do justice to the type of work that we have to do to deliver the right talent.
Yeah, good points. I mean, if you just look at the compensation, it could be the same exact job in different markets, and
yep,
there might be a different pay range, and simple things like that could totally throw it off.
Yeah, I mean, I would love this group's conversational piece on. I mean, I'm torn on this concept that because somebody wants to work virtually or was willing to work in a lower cost location, should they be paid less than the person that has to work in the higher cost location?
No.
I see Marilyn saying no, but I
worked in comp for 10 years, and so on the HR side, and kind of saw the whole mechanism in action. But why should the employer save the money, right? And so if I'm not living in the Bay Area and I'm in, hold on, wherever, and but I have other things that I'm giving up.
Right.
And so yeah, and that's just my own personal opinion, you know, and our employer will argue, but I think it creates, it's creating a really, really interesting conundrum from a comp perspective.
Well, and I bring it from a
Mhm.
perspective of, I think we did a terrible job at comp from the beginning of not actually quoting what the comp package was with what was the cost of living differential. Because, you know, that is so much, we've just based it into base comp. But if you think about what you do in other jobs, where you have a shift differential, if you're willing to work third shift, you're going to make more money on third shift than you are in first shift because of it's a need or it's a high valued position. But we don't do a good job of differentiating between is there a cost of living differential. Now, I will fight both sides of this because I do think a fair pay is fair pay to do the work. There's pay for, you should be paid equally for the work that you're doing, that you're being accomplished. But if an organization chooses to pay a difference or a delta because of a cost of living shift, I think everybody should have whatever that cost of living shift is based on their area. So open a can of worms, close it back up again before we have any time to really go after it. But it's one of those conversations I like to have because it's such a hot topic right now, and I think it is important to the way organizations are going to retain talent going forward.
I think it matters where you are too. Like I've been in Maine for decades, but I've been working from home, and I'm not working for any companies. I've never worked for a company in the last 15, 20 that is in Maine because I don't pay anything here. I work for companies based in New York, Massachusetts, and so because of it affords me better pay because the pay is so much different here. And then I was talking to somebody on the plane back from Vegas, and he's moving from San Francisco to Maine because his company, he's been working remotely, and they said they're going to continue to work remotely. He said, okay, so then can I move to Maine? And, with no change in his pay, he can have a much better life here.
Mm-hmm.
But if you said, you can move there, sure, but it's going to cost you 30% of your salary, I'd be like, nope. So I don't know. I think we pay a lot for like working from home. We pay a lot of expenses that the company would normally have to pay.
Yep.
One thing that I'm curious about is with the mandates, if they make employers mandate vaccines, if they have 50 or more employers, are a lot more people going to go gig, and a lot more smaller businesses going to go lean towards the 1099 employees and not full time,
right,
to avoid that. And will that be, and that'll be an attractor to certain segments of the market and a detractor to other segments of the market, as far as, if my husband was working and I could just get on his insurance, and, I would, opt for that maybe, so that sort of thing. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think that everyone's going to have to match. It's going to be a culture match. Like, what is most important to you? And, the fact that you can bring your dog to work and you get free Starbucks might be like the end all to some people, and not, because, nothing to others.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a few years even before the pandemic, IBM kind of set an interesting tone, I think, in the market around this. They had for years and years been letting more and more people work from home, and then started encouraging it because they recognized that, the prime office space was expensive and they could save money. And, people could use their own telephones and everything at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they realized they wanted to go through another downsizing to help their stock market, this is all conjecture, of course, help their stock price go up, they told everybody, hey, you have to now report to wherever your local office is. And some people that were living in North Carolina, their local office happened to be in Vietnam or wherever IBM decided their office was.
Right.
And they either had to relocate to Vietnam or resign.
Right.
And guess what? A lot of people did quit. I don't know what happened outside of that, but it was, that was a a gutsy and I think stupid move, but
Mhm.
that was it. I mean, you could probably, live quite well in Vietnam and stay with IBM, but they would have cut your salary to the local market. So
Yep.
I think I know they changed their position on that. A few black eyes from that.
Awesome. I'm seeing some chat messages as folks are kind of getting back on to other things for their days. And thank you remarks, Elaine, and commenting on how insightful the topic was, and appreciating your input today. I think that it really was a topic that I know Ward and I, thinking about this event, it was kind of an obvious thing for us to try to tackle. Kind of highlight how this particular audience and this group can kind of be a part of that solution, and the things that they can be thinking about in their businesses on how to solve some of these problems. So does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Just fantastic cover of the topic. Just really good. Excellent.